World leaders seem untouchable, protected by diplomacy, international law, and armies of bodyguards. But what happens when a powerful country decides those protections don't apply anymore? Today, I'll explain how countries detain, coerce, and disappear each other's leaders like you're 5 years old. By the end, you'll understand the specific mechanics that make this possible. You'll also see why smaller nations live in constant fear of becoming the next target. Here's what nobody tells you about this whole system. When a country grabs another nation's leader, it's not about justice, it's about control. Imagine negotiating over splitting pizza, but instead of talking, you grab the other person's phone. You say, "Let's discuss this now." That's the global stage, except it's presidents instead of phones. And it's oil, military bases, or resources instead of pizza slices. This isn't some dusty Cold War tactic that ended decades ago. It's happening right now, and it's one of the most effective tools countries use when regular diplomacy doesn't deliver results fast enough. The recent Trump situation has everyone suddenly paying attention, but this pattern has been running quietly for decades. Let's start with the classics, because this playbook is old. Napoleon didn't just lose at Waterloo and retire peacefully. Britain exiled him twice, first to Elba, then to St. Helena, a remote Atlantic rock thousands of miles from anywhere. They did this specifically because leaving him anywhere accessible meant he could rebuild power and threaten European stability again. They didn't assassinate him publicly because that looked messy. They just made him disappear to a place nobody could find on a map and waited for nature to do the rest. Problem solved. No international incident, no mess. Fast forward to 1961 in the Congo with Patrice Lumumba. Patrice Lumumba becomes Congo's first democratically elected leader. He wants to control his own country's resources instead of handing them to Belgium and the United States. Within months, he's dead, assassinated with direct foreign intelligence involvement. The official story kept changing, but the result stayed the same. The guy who wouldn't play ball got permanently removed from the game. Then there's Panama in 1989 with Manuel Noriega and a full military invasion. Manuel Noriega was a drug-trafficking dictator and a former CIA asset who stopped cooperating with American interests in Central America. The solution was direct, brutal, and impossible to miss. The United States invaded Panama, arrested him, flew him to Miami, and put him on trial in American courts, not international ones, for crimes committed in Panama by a Panamanian leader. The message to every other regional leader was crystal clear: cooperate, or we'll come get you, and nobody will stop us. Libya's Muammar Gaddafi ruled for over 40 years and survived multiple assassination attempts until 2011, when NATO decided he had to go. They didn't send diplomats. They armed rebel groups and provided air support until Gaddafi was dragged from a drainage pipe and killed in the street. Hillary Clinton laughed about it on camera. We came, we saw, he died. Whether you think Gaddafi deserved it isn't the point. The point is that a coalition of powerful countries decided someone had to go. International law couldn't stop them because it only works when powerful countries agree to follow it. Here's where it gets current and uncomfortably close to today. In 2019, Bolivia's president Evo Morales fled after what he called a coup, allegedly pushed by outside actors who opposed his lithium mining policies. Lithium makes your phone battery work and powers every electric car. Whether it was technically a coup or just political pressure depends on who you ask. But a leader who wasn't cooperating with foreign corporations suddenly wasn't president anymore. And that timing wasn't coincidence. Or take Belarus in 2021 and a hijacked commercial flight. A Ryanair flight from Greece to Lithuania got forced to land in Minsk because Belarusian authorities wanted to arrest a dissident journalist on board. They scrambled a fighter jet, faked a bomb threat, diverted an international commercial flight, and grabbed the guy off the plane. The whole world condemned it, called it air piracy, issued strongly worded statements, and then basically moved on. Because what were they actually going to do about it? Invade Belarus and start a war? The reality is that without muscle to back up outrage, international law is just expensive paper with fancy signatures. And we can't ignore Jamal Khashoggi and what happened in Turkey. A Saudi journalist and critic walks into a consulate in Turkey and never walks out. U.S. intelligence concluded that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman approved the operation. The response? Some sanctions, diplomatic scolding, and then business as usual. because Saudi Arabia has oil and buys weapons, and nobody wanted to burn that bridge. This matters to you because every diplomatic crisis on the news likely has this playbook running in the background. When the United States talks about promoting democracy, sometimes that means supporting fair elections, and sometimes it means removing leaders who won't sell oil at friendly prices. When China talks about non-interference, they mean it for themselves, but not necessarily for smaller neighbors who owe them money. When Russia talks about protecting ethnic Russians, that's code for justifying why they rolled tanks into Crimea. Everyone has their version, but the pattern stays the same. Powerful countries remove obstacles, and smaller countries learn that cooperation isn't optional. The biggest misconception is that the international community will protect leaders who play by the rules. Here's the truth. The international community is just a polite name for whoever has the most aircraft carriers. The United Nations can condemn actions all day, but the Security Council has 5 permanent members with veto power. They're the same 5 countries most likely to be doing the detaining, coercing, and disappearing in the first place. It's like having a neighborhood watch, where the biggest thieves on the block also decide which crimes count. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed, just not for people who assumed international law meant something enforceable. Here's what makes this tactic so effective. It works because everyone pretends it's unthinkable until it happens. Politicians give speeches about sovereignty and self-determination and respecting borders. Then the moment someone becomes inconvenient, all those rules vanish faster than expired milk. It's the ultimate negotiation leverage. You can't out-negotiate someone willing to grab you off a plane or fund a rebel group to hunt you down. Normal diplomacy assumes both sides are sitting at the table in good faith. But when one side can flip the table and walk out with your leader in handcuffs, the whole game changes. So where does this leave smaller nations? Some countries are too big or too nuclear arms to mess with. Nobody's kidnapping the leader of China or Russia or the United States because that's called World War III. But mid-sized countries? Smaller nations with resources but not enough military muscle to defend themselves? They're in this constant game of reading the room, figuring out which bigger power to align with, making sure they don't anger anyone who could wreck their economy or arm their opposition overnight. It's like being the new kid at a school where half the students are twice your size and the principal is in a different time zone. You learn real quick who you can't afford to upset. This is why you see smaller countries making seemingly irrational decisions, siding with authoritarian regimes, accepting unfair trade deals, or allowing foreign military bases on their soil. They're not stupid. They're navigating a system where saying no to the wrong country can mean your leader ends up in exile, in prison, or dead. The choice isn't between good governance and bad governance. It's between survival and becoming the next cautionary tale that proves international law only applies to countries without powerful friends. And here's the kicker. This dynamic shapes every major geopolitical decision you see on the news. When a country suddenly switches alliances, when a leader makes a shocking policy reversal, when a government collapses seemingly overnight, there's often a bigger power in the background making it clear what happens to leaders who don't cooperate. The threats don't need to be explicit. Everyone already knows the playbook. They've watched it happen to neighbors, to allies, to leaders who thought they were untouchable until they weren't. To recap, detaining or disappearing leaders is a consistent geopolitical tool used when diplomacy doesn't move fast enough or deliver the desired results. Napoleon got exiled because letting him roam free was too risky for European powers. Lumumba, Noriega, and Gaddafi got removed when they stopped cooperating with foreign interests. Belarus forced down a plane in 2021 to grab a dissident and showed the world what modern impunity looks like. Khashoggi walked into a consulate and never walked out because oil money talks louder than justice. International law only protects you if powerful countries feel like enforcing it, and they rarely do when their interests are on the line. So here's the real question. If this keeps happening and the countries doing it control the very institutions meant to stop them, what would actually need to change for smaller nations to have leaders who can say no without disappearing?